numbers continue in a positive direction, phase 3 will be towards the end of the summer, early fall. And phase 4 is really the new normal, with the expectation that there would be a vaccine in place. Again, I'm not an epidemiologist, so I cannot tell you when we'll develop a vaccine, but I've heard predictions anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. So the new normal is not going to be on us very soon. I would note that many of the things that drive demand on the MBTA are either not happening or happening in very different ways than they have in the past. So, for instance, the student population, both K through 12 and our colleges and universities, they remain closed. The expectation is that in phase 2, restaurants will open with some limited capacity. I think it's still an open question whether every restaurant will open under these conditions. And airport travel is significantly reduced as well, down to about 5%. Folks are also hesitant to get back on transit. This was a poll that was taken in the Boston Globe at the end of April, beginning of May, shows that a lot of folks are going to be hesitant to ride. I will say that this poll did not ask you whether you were a rider beforehand. So, it's my belief that there's a group of people who are unlikely to take transit under any conditions, which too bad for them. So it does show that there is some hesitation, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the full story for transit riders. Just to give you a sense of how the phasing works and what it means for our service, we're currently in phase 1. There was no change in service from the previous phase. So we had the bus is currently running on an adapted Saturday schedule where we add in trips on a run as directed basis. The blue, red, orange, and green line are all running on essentially Saturday schedules, Saturday headways. Commuter rail is on a significantly reduced schedule, and the ferries remain closed. As we enter phase 2, and this is a little contingent on timing, depending on when we enter phase 2, the T will start planning to add service, but we will not actually add service until later in June. We will be adding additional service on high demand bus routes. We'll also be putting a handful of bus routes that we weren't running in phase 1. We'll put them back into service. We'll go back to the regular schedule on the blue line. And we won't necessarily be back at the regular schedule, but we will have shorter time in between trains on the red, orange, and green line. We'll also be adding trains, roughly doubling the number of trains we're running on commuter rail, and we'll be introducing additional service onto the Fairmont line in the off-peak where we have capacity. We will be reopening the ferry service. As you can see from this chart, phase 3 is really where we get back to full service on the bus, as well as full service across the commuter rail, full service across rapid transit subway system. We are still thinking about what the commuter rail schedule will look like. We anticipate modifying it from kind of the previous pre-COVID service. One of the things we're looking at is how much of our commuter rail ridership will actually come back. And to the extent that we have extra capacity on commuter rail, are there things we can think about to utilize that capacity more efficiently? One of the things we did just last week, in fact, was put together a pilot where you were able to take the commuter rail from Lynn to North Station for the same price as the subway, in an attempt to get people to get off the buses that go to the blue line and get on the commuter rail. So we'll see if this is, we're going to track this carefully, and we'll see if there are changes that we can make to make the service more useful to people. We'll also resume full service on the ferries, and then in phase 4, we're doing everything, at full service. One of the things I wanted to talk about was, what is the MBTA doing to protect its employees? What is the MBTA doing to protect its passengers? One of the things we were pleased when the governor issued an executive order requiring the use of face coverings in public places. The order specifically includes MBTA vehicles, stations, and stops. I want to use my words very carefully here. It is a face covering order. So that can be anything that covers your mouth, such as a scarf or a bandana. All face masks are face coverings, but all face coverings are not face masks, if that makes sense. And we believe that most people have the ability to come up with something that suits this purpose. We will be doing on a very limited basis some targeted distribution of masks at key stations, but we think most people have the ability to come up with something that's an acceptable face covering. We're going to be promoting the use of face coverings as well as other social distancing practices as part of our Ride Safer campaign. One of the questions that I've been getting is, how will the MBTA enforce this order? And I want to be quite clear on this. The order itself has an exception for people who are unable to wear a mask due to a medical condition. This could either be something along the lines of a respiratory condition or a behavioral health issue that prevents them from wearing a mask. The order specifically prohibits anyone from asking riders to verify their medical condition. So we're not going to be in a position to refuse service to people who are wearing face coverings, or you may have seen in other cities that have experimented with this. I think it's gone quite badly when they've attempted to remove people who are not wearing face coverings. So we are asking everyone who is able, please wear a face covering for yourself, for your fellow riders, for our employees. But if you can't wear a face covering, we are not going to refuse service. One of the things we're working on is personal protective equipment for our employees. I would have to say at the beginning of the COVID crisis, it was a great frustration for us that we could not get enough of this equipment because everyone else was trying to buy it at the same time. I'm sure you've seen the governor in a state of agitation when supplies have been intercepted at the airport, and they resorted to using the Patriot plane to fly a bunch of face coverings over from China. Right now, we have over 1 million face masks on hand that we are in the process of distributing to our employees. We have 6,300 employees, so we need a lot of face masks in order for them to have masks and use them properly. We have hand sanitizer. Every employee has access to individual hand sanitizer dispensers. We actually had to we were able to get 50, it says here 275. I'm not sure if they're 275, but we had to get huge drums of hand sanitizer. And we actually have employees filling tiny bottles so that we can give them out to each one of our employees. And we're also working on barricades. About 60% of our buses came equipped with barricades, and now we're working on building additional plexiglass barriers on all buses to encapsulate our drivers. We're also testing our employees. We have done temperature checks on. We have 6,300 employees, and we've done over 20,000 temperature checks on a rotating basis at our facilities. So, the average MBTA employee has been tested 3 times. I would say when you pull away the corporate staff who may be working remotely, I'd say it's probably more like 4 or 5 times. We are also offering access. Anyone at the MBTA who wants to be tested for COVID-19 has had access to a test for a number of weeks now. We have tested over 1,000 of our employees. Right now, I believe we have roughly around 30 active COVID-19 cases where people are out of the office. We have over 100 employees who have been out, have recovered, and are now safe to return to work. One of the things we're doing is we are cleaning and decontaminating vehicles on a regular basis. We disinfect our stations and buses on a daily basis. We disinfect the touch points in high traffic facilities twice a day, and we are disinfecting the touch points on, sort of the touch points on surfaces in our core subway stations every 4 hours. We are also doing midday decontamination where possible at layover locations. And we are also performing electrostatic fogging on a bi-weekly basis, that's every 2 weeks, to decontaminate our bus vehicles. As part of our Ride Safer campaign, we are asking our riders, where feasible, to socially distance. And we're going to have that messaging up in our stations. We're developing signage for stations and vehicles. We're going to be providing guidance as opposed to specific places, stand here, don't stand here. We really think this is a more flexible approach. it is this is an issue where we are concerned about enforcement. We don't want anyone, we don't want riders, we don't want employees, drivers feeling that they have to enforce. But we do want to provide people guidance. One of the key things that we are doing is, pardon me there, one of the key things that we are doing is we have set a new crowding threshold for MBTA vehicles that is significantly lower than before. Pre-COVID, the service delivery policy said 58 people in a 40-foot bus was crowded. We are now saying that 20 people in a bus is crowded, and we are putting together, what we're trying to do is put together a way that we can track crowding and communicate it to riders. You know, and we're working through the technical details of this, but what we hope to do is give people who have the option the ability to understand whether or not it's approaching the crowding threshold, near the crowding threshold, or it is actually crowded. So for folks who do have discretion about when they choose to travel, they can have a good idea of the level of crowding. We're going to be getting this message out, not only with signage, but on our screens and through our social media accounts. I want to encourage everyone to take a look at mbta.com and also follow us on Twitter as we roll these pilots out in terms of providing crowding information and rollout information on service. This is your best bet to get it. And if Judge King will indulge me, I just want to close with a thank you to the employees of the MBTA who have worked really hard through an incredibly difficult period to provide service to our customers. There's a lot fewer customers, but the customers who are there really need this service. They are healthcare workers. They're people going to buy groceries, to get medicine, to get healthcare. And you know, none of our employees, I think, and no one who started at the MBTA envisioned this kind of scenario with this kind of challenging environment. And I just want to close with my appreciation to that group. So thank you, everyone, and I turn it back over to Judge King.
Thank you so much, General Manager. That was a great presentation and update on how the T will be involved in the reopening plan for the state. Now I would like to turn it to Judge King to give us an update on the status of the BCIL and MBTA settlement agreement. Thank you. Judge, you're on mute.
All right. I realize that many of you have participated in these meetings before, but for those of you who haven't, I would like to just briefly give you an overview of the background of the case. So I just want to, okay. Yeah. So this case started back in 2003, and it was settled in 2006. The settlement agreement provides for an independent monitor to oversee the compliance with the settlement agreement, which is fairly complicated, containing more than 200 provisions. In February of 2007, the Federal District Court in Boston appointed me to be the independent monitor. The agreement provides for public meetings twice a year, and if my math is correct, I think this is the 37th public meeting. Unfortunately, for the first time, we're not able to do this in person, but thanks to the technology available and the efforts of Samantha, we are able to present this through Zoom. Now, I'm going to make some brief remarks about how the T is doing, and then you'll hear from some T managers bringing you up to date on certain provisions that are taking place. And then there'll be a period of an hour where we'll entertain questions and answers. We do have a number of T managers who regularly participate in these meetings, so it's very important for them to hear your comments about how well you feel the T is doing and whether that's you have criticisms or whether you have praise, that that type of input is welcome. Let me just give you a brief overview of in terms of where things stand now. In 2018, the parties sat down and went over all the obligations under the settlement agreement and agreed that, with the exception of 46 items, the T was in agreement. They then signed an amended settlement agreement, which, among other things, sets forth a process for determining when the T is in compliance with the remaining 46 items. As of last fall, the T had submitted to me for my review a list of 24 items under the original settlement agreement, which the T felt they were now in compliance with. The T provided me with detailed documentation in support of their position, and the plaintiffs were given a copy of all that and an opportunity to let me know their thoughts with regard to whether or not the T was in compliance. At the end of that process, I determined that with regard to 23 of the 24 items, the T was now in compliance. As to 22 of those items, those are in a category called compliant, but an ongoing obligation, which means that I will continue to monitor the T's performance in those areas. And if the T's performance should slip, they would then be moved into the non-compliant category. For example, and there's one item that was moved to the compliant category with no ongoing obligation. That had to do with the elevator in Harvard Square. So once that was checked off, the T had no further obligations. Of course, there's a separate provision in the agreement dealing with elevator operations, and I'm pleased to say that the T is still doing an excellent job with regard to the uptime for both elevators and escalators. It's now regularly over 99%. Sometimes both will hit 100% in a particular day. Now, once the T has completed all of its obligations under the amended settlement agreement, the Riders Transportation Access Group, known as RTAG, will have the responsibility to take over monitoring the T's performance. So for those of you who may not be familiar with RTAG, it's the successor community advisory group to ACT. Now, a vital part of the settlement agreement is the requirement that there be an internal monitoring program. Basically, you have secret riders, mystery riders going out and observing what takes place and then submitting reports, which are provided to me on a regular basis. These reports are of vital importance and assistance to management so they know where the problems are and what to do to fix them. If employees are not living up to their obligations, they are warned, sometimes disciplined. And this is very important in terms of making sure that the T employees not only understand what their obligations are, but to make sure that they understand that there'll be consequences if they fail to live up to their responsibilities. Now, due to COVID-19, the current monitoring program was suspended on March 11th, and it's not clear when the program will be able to resume. But I'm confident that once the situation improves sufficiently where it's safe for the observers to go out and resume their observations, that the program will resume. Now, with regard to the bus service, I'm pleased to report that through March of this year, bus service continued to be excellent. I'm not going to bore you with all the statistics other than to mention a few areas where the T still needs to improve more. But a few statistics involving obstructed bus stops, for example, it's down to about 4% of the time, and quite often it's another bus that's blocking the the bus stop because one bus is pulled in before another bus is left at a stop where multiple bus lines are served. Buses are pulling to the curb about 93% of the time. But the T drivers are doing a very good job when it comes to pre-boarding wheeled mobility device users. They're doing a much better job with regard to wheeled mobility device securements. 99% of the time, the mobility devices are being secured without being asked. Compliance is a little bit below what I would like to see it when it comes to making sure that all 4 straps are properly tightened. The reports show that all 4 straps are only tightened about 88% of the time. So this is an area where I would like to see more improvement. Shoulder belts is another area where more needs to be done. Drivers are required to ask wheel mobility drivers, passengers, whether they would like to use the lap shoulder belt. And in 2019, the operators failed to ask the passenger about 46% of the time. In the first quarter of this year, the rate fell to 57% of the time. And also, when the drivers did apply the seat belts or lap belts, they're not always doing it properly. About 32% of the time, the driver did not properly apply the belt. So this is another area where I'd like to see more improvement. Bus drivers are required to provide a reasonable request for accommodations, for example, lowering the kneeler or ramp, providing priority seating, or giving destination orientation assistance. Prior to COVID-19, the operators were meeting their responsibility in this area 98% of the time, or I think most recently 99.5% of the time. But as many of you are aware, buses have been boarding from the rear door since shortly after the pandemic began. Understandably, bus drivers who initially didn't even have personal protective equipment were reluctant to be allowing passengers to use the front door. Now, under the ADA and under the settlement agreement, the bus drivers are obligated to allow passengers to enter through the front door without the need to give any explanation. I did receive complaints that this wasn't always happening. As a result, management issued a 7-page special order reminding the employees of their responsibility in providing a very helpful, detailed set of frequently asked questions so the drivers could anticipate what type of situations might arise and what their response should be. So I'm hopeful that we'll see fewer complaints in this regard. Years ago, there used to be fairly significant problems with rude behavior by bus drivers. You really see that anymore. 99% of the time, the bus drivers are being very polite. With the exception of the Red Line, the subway operations continue to do well. And you may recall last June, there was a major derailment on the Red Line that has significantly affected service, including providing stop announcements. And there was a significant drop-off in the percentage of times when there's no stop announcement made. I'm pleased to say that as of the most recent quarter, the stop announcements has improved and was only lacking in about 8% of the time. There was a problem with the Red Line also with regard to notifying passengers of the elevator outage at Andrew and Central Square, and that continued to be a problem until those elevators were back in service. So it's no longer a problem because the elevators are now working. But when there is elevator outages, the operators need to do a better job of making sure that passengers are alerted before they reach the station that there's no elevator available. T continues to do a very good job with regard to deploying bridge plates and making sure that there's an employee available when the passenger gets off the train with a bridge plate to the system. As I mentioned, and escalator operations are regularly at 99% or better. I have received reports concerning the automated fare vending machines. Those machines have certain accessibility features. And during the first quarter of this year, the machines were only fully operational with regard to the accessibility features 34% of the time. So that's a very sad state of affairs, and the T needs to do a better job of checking these machines to make sure that they're in good operating condition. Now, in addition to the monitoring reports, I also receive reports of all complaints made by T riders through phone calls or Twitter or whatever other ways they might want to communicate. And the number of complaints relating to accessibility remain low given the size of the ridership. And many of the complaints deal with crowding and inability to get on a bus or a train due to crowded conditions. Now, if you observe an operator failing to make a stop announcement or any other accessibility related problem, please call the T at their 617-225-3200 number and provide as much information as you can, the time of day, the car, bus number, the badge number of the operator, if you can get that. Because without that information, the T really can't follow up on the complaint. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Sam Johnson, and she will introduce the next speaker on the agenda.
Thank you so much, Judge King. The next speaker we have up is Laura Brailsford, the Assistant Manager for System-Wide Accessibility, and she is going to give some updates on accessibility initiatives at the T.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. Just give me 1 second to share my screen here. All right, there we go. Before I dive in, I just wanted to briefly follow up on the General Manager's opening remarks. Over the past couple of weeks, we have all witnessed the killings of innocent Black men and women in this country. And I think it is really important to talk about this in the context of these meetings and the work we're doing here. We spend a lot of time within the MBTA and within our community, the disability community, talking about how disability rights are civil rights and fighting and advocating for full inclusion in all aspects of everyday life. It's clear that that is something that we will never be able to achieve if such significant injustices are going on throughout the country to other groups. The Black community has shown huge, incredible allyship to the disability community over the decades with respect to the disability rights movement. And this is an opportunity for us, especially of those of us who are white within the disability community, to step up and show that same allyship. So I just encourage all of us, especially, again, those of us who are white, to just take every opportunity to say that what is happening is totally unacceptable. Shifting to thinking about how the COVID-19 pandemic has particularly impacted our customers with disabilities. As the GM mentioned, a number of new policies and protocols have gone into place. A number are still underway. One thing I want to emphasize tonight is that accessibility has been a priority throughout the development of all of these priorities, or all of these policies. We recognize that many of our riders, many essential employees have disabilities and still need to be using the system. So it's just as important as ever that we're making our service fully accessible to everyone. As the judge mentioned, we have a policy in place both on bus and Green Line that asks customers to board using the rear door to keep customers away from the operator at the front of the bus. However, as he mentioned, that we have a very clear rule that anybody who requests to use the front door must be permitted to do so without question. We have received, early on, we did receive a number of complaints that this was not happening. I just want to assure everyone that as we receive complaints, we are taking the time working with bus operations to investigate each and every one of them and make sure that we are taking appropriate action. We will continue to do that as long as this policy is in place. However, one thing I want to share is that, and emphasize that this is a temporary policy. We expect later this summer, we will be able to resume front door boarding once all of those plexiglass barriers that the GM showed you get installed. Likewise, the face mask, face covering policy has a unique impact on many of our riders. Again, as the GM mentioned, if you are unable to wear a face covering because of an underlying medical condition, you will not be denied service. But we are asking all our riders to do their best to wear a face covering to protect themselves, other customers, and our employees. One policy that has not yet been put into place but will be implemented over the next few weeks is the guideline, the request that our customers limit an elevator use to one party per elevator ride. I think, as everybody knows and has likely experienced, our elevators are not as spacious as you would like them to be during a time of when social distancing is critical. So we're asking that our riders limit the use so that it's either one individual if they're traveling on their own, or one group who's already been traveling together at a time per elevator ride. We're going to be putting up signs and making announcements starting at some of our highest ridership stations later this month, and gradually expanding the signage system-wide. So as more riders come back to the system, one thing we want to make really clear, even though all of our employees will be wearing masks, even though we're going to be asking people to keep a safe distance from each other, if you need assistance, we are going to provide it to you. One of our core policies here within the T is that all reasonable requests must be honored. So this will continue to include things like assistance boarding or exiting a vehicle, getting help through fare gates, help finding a seat. As long as the request is reasonable, we will be honoring it. If the employee who you ask for assistance is not able to honor it, they are required to get on their radio to dispatch and assistance from another employee will be coordinated. If you can't find an employee in a station and you need assistance, you can always use one of our call boxes, and that will connect you to one of our hub centers, and they will be able to dispatch someone to assist. All right, so I want to pivot here to just let you know about some really exciting accessibility upgrades that have nothing to do with the pandemic. So despite the fact that many of us have been really focused on making sure the systems remain safe over the past few months, there's been a tremendous amount of work that's continued moving forward on our core accessibility goals, from new policies to station upgrades. So just to share a few of them with you, in early April and later in April, the Central Square inbound elevator, which had been out of service being rebuilt for a while, reopens. We now have a fully transparent pass-through inbound elevator. In other good news, Mansfield Commuter Rail Station has benefited from a full upgrade with substantially repaired mini highs, an accessible path between the inbound and outbound platforms, and a number of other important upgrades. Construction is just getting underway at a number of stops, from Babcock, Pleasant Street, BU, and St. Paul, all on the B line, Brookline Hills, Oak Grove, and Ruggles. On our commuter rail, both Natick and Chelsea are underway and will be made fully accessible. In addition to the actual construction that's going on, we've got a ton of designs in the pipeline. Huge amount of work going on the Green Line right now. So we've got plans and funding set aside to make Symphony, Hines, New and Highlands, Beaconsfield, Chestnut Hills, Elliott, and Waban fully accessible. For those that are familiar with the Green Line, this means that we will end up with a fully accessible D branch when those projects are completed. In addition with Symphony and Hines, we're able to knock out 2 of our 4 last inaccessible subterranean subway stations. So we're very excited about that. And we haven't forgotten about designs on commuter rail. We've got 3 stations in Newinville, Auburndale, and West Newen. We have Winchester Station, all of which are completely inaccessible today, will be made fully accessible through full high-level platforms, ramps, and elevators. And then we've also got some important upgrades coming at Lynn Commuter Rail Station. So that's a lot of big stuff, a lot of work going on, much of it led by our capital delivery and Green Line transformation team. In addition to all of that big work, which takes a lot of time and a lot of planning, we have been working to identify every opportunity for squeezing in important improvements. You may have heard that over the last 2 weeks of May, the Blue Line was shut down in order to accelerate really significant, important track and signal and station upgrades. When we learned about the upcoming shutdown, we were able to identify a number of accessibility upgrades that were needed to be made. So during the shutdown, not only was that core station track signal work completed, accessibility benefited as well. We were able to install detectable warning panels where they never existed at Bowdoin Station, and we were able to repair a number of detectable warning stations at several other stations. We were also able to rip out and fully replace all of the elevator flooring at Airport Station. For those of you who were able to join us 6 months ago, we talked about an effort underway to replace the flooring at a number of key elevators to make it less susceptible to damage from water and urine. All right. And one other project we're especially excited about, and that I think will have an immediate significant benefit to our riders, is that we have been able to move forward with the purchase and deployment of automated door openers at every single subway station where there is a door leading you to the accessible entrance, at the accessible entrance. We evaluated a number of options and settled on one that I think will be a significant improvement from our standard design. The photo on the right hand of my screen here shows circled in red an elongated push button that activates the door. It's about 2.5, 3 feet long. What this allows someone to do is simply press it with their hands, press it with their hip. If you are using, for those of us using wheel mobility, we can press a part of our chair into the door opener to activate it. So we have this photo here is from one of our first that went in at Prudential. We are developing the full timeline for deployment as we speak, but we anticipate these will be rolling out over the next year. So I think this will make a really good, this will make a really noticeable difference for those of us just coming and going throughout the stations every day. And just to close, I want to let you know that we really do, especially now when we, as the judge mentioned, are not running our undercover monitoring program, we really want to hear from you about how your experiences on the T are going. So you can get in touch with us a number of ways. Our call center is at 222-3200. You can also file a complaint or ask a question or submit a commendation by going to our website, mbta.com, and clicking on support at the top right portion of the screen. And you can always tweet at MBTA. For those of you who are actively riding the system today, even if you don't have any questions or concerns, we would really love to hear from you. My team is very interested in hearing how your everyday trips are going, both the good and the bad, in the context of social distancing and adjusting to our new service. So if you're interested in getting in touch, the best way to do that is to email us directly at swa@mbta.com. Finally, I just wanted to give a quick plug for the next time we'll be getting together. The Riders Transportation Access Group is our official advisory committee regarding accessibility issues. Their next meeting is coming up on Thursday, the 16th at 4 p.m. And you'll be hearing from one of their co-chairs in a little bit who will fill you in more. So again, thank you for being here tonight. We hope that this is a useful way to hear about updates, but more importantly, let us know how things are going. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sam.
Thank you so much, Laura. It was really nice to have a reminder of all the safety procedures we're taking for COVID-19, as well as an update on accessibility initiatives that are unrelated to the pandemic. Next up, Logan Nash, the Deputy Director of the Customer Technology Department, is going to provide information on communicating information on crowding. To you.
All right, thank you very much. So yeah, my name is Logan Nash. I'm with the Customer Technology Department at the MBTA. So we're the group that provides a lot of the digital tools available to help riders use the service. So this includes mbta.com, real-time arrival predictions that are available in smartphone apps and other tools, and also things like automated stop announcements on our buses. But what I'm excited to talk today about is our the work we've been doing that the general manager mentioned on communicating crowding information out to riders. So when we started thinking about this a little with the beginning of the pandemic, trying to think about things we could do with technology that might help riders use MBTA service during the pandemic. And crowding was one of the sort of main things that came to mind. So we put out a survey, really wanted to reach riders who were using the service under the pandemic and understand what their concerns and frustrations were around crowding. So thank you to the RTAG group in particular, helped share that survey. We got a lot of really good and helpful responses. The main one I want to highlight today briefly is that riders told us there were two kinds of crowding information they felt would be helpful in the pandemic. So the first kind that was brought up to us was real-time crowding information, right? Riders were interested in knowing what, how full is a vehicle that's coming towards them? If you're waiting on a bus, can they expect that vehicle to be crowded or not? And the second kind of information is historical crowding trends. And this has a slightly different use case. Riders were interested if, they know that they need to make a trip tomorrow. They were interested in seeing on their routes, on the subway and bus routes that are available to them, when are those routes least likely to be crowded to help them avoid crowds if possible. So the examples that I have on my screen are from other transit agencies. The one on the top left shows a few different categories of crowding, which is from a transit agency in New Zealand, the way they categorize their buses to help riders know about crowding. And then the other image is an image from London, actually, with a graph of crowding information sort of throughout the day, again, to help riders make decisions about when to travel. At the MBTA, we're actively working on both of these kinds of crowding information for riders. The first one, real-time crowding information, is the one that we've done the most work on and we're planning to release this month. So that will mean that for bus routes, we'll be making, for certain bus routes this month, we'll be making information available on how crowded those vehicles are in real time. So we want to start with a handful of routes where we know crowding is an issue and expand from there. The second kind of crowding information, historical crowding trends, we're also working on that. That will be available across more MBTA services. So that will include bus routes. It'll also include our red line, blue line, and orange line routes. That's going to be, we're working on making that available later in the summer as well. When we are able to make this data available, it's going to be, riders will be able to find it where they normally find MBTA information, mbta.com. We're going to put it on digital screens that can accept this information. And it'll also be available on our official smartphone app, Transit app. One thing I want to note too is that this will be part of the open data that we make available to third-party app developers. So you may use a different smartphone app, for example, to learn about real-time arrival predictions or MBTA schedules. We're making this data available to those app developers too, because we really want as many riders as possible to benefit from this crowding information when we publish it. So that's all I had. I wanted to keep it real brief, but I did just want to note that I'm especially excited to be able to talk to this group about this crowding information, because while certainly crowding is a particular concern for folks during the pandemic, we know that before the pandemic, many riders were certainly concerned about crowding. And after the pandemic, there are certainly going to be riders for whom crowding continues to be a concern for safety and comfort. And so we're hopeful that by making this investment in response to the pandemic, that this is going to be a tool that riders will have available afterwards as well. The final thing I'll note is that this is a really new kind of data to be sharing, not just for the MBTA, but for transit agencies in general. So to our knowledge, when we publish this information, we'll be the largest transit agency in the US to do so. And that's great. We're really excited to be able to get this information out there to riders, but it means that we'll need feedback from groups like this, from other riders. We'll need you to let us know, right? Is this working for you? Is this something that's helping you feel safe and use the service during the pandemic? So Laura shared a number of ways to get in touch with us. I, especially around crowding information, are really interested to get to get feedback from riders both before and after we make this information available. So thank you very much. And I will turn things back over to Sam.
Thank you so much, Logan. It's great to see all the work that the T is doing to be able to communicate real-time crowding information to riders. So our next speaker is Joanne Daniels-Feingold. Joanne is the lead named plaintiff from the case, the MBTA BCIL case, and Joanne will provide a statement from the plaintiffs.
Hi, thanks, Logan. Consumer Technology's done a really great job making it better for everybody. This pandemic has made it necessary for everybody around the world to alter the way we go about our daily lives. And we're really following healthcare professional directives in order to really keep ourselves healthy and to prevent the spread of this virus. Recently, the murder of Mr. Lloyd out in Minneapolis has caught our attention and actually changed things at the T. When we've got rallies and other things happening that interrupt our transportation, but for a good reason, so that people can express how they feel about situations as they are in this country. Personally, coming from a police family, it really, bad policemen have always been like the worst people in the world to me. And I'm taking this personally. This is not a great thing. But I know too, there are a whole lot more good guys than there are bad guys. But it hurts. This hurts. Anyway, it's made it necessary for adjustments to be made on the T. Okay, in spite of everything, the need for transportation access remains, and the T has adjusted to keep drivers and passengers safe. They've adjusted, as it's been noted, boarding at the back of buses and Green Line trains, and it's also been noted that not everybody can board that way. I know there have been complaints, and I've heard them too, about people who are ambulatory who've been refused entry on the front of the buses. And it's true, not everybody can board at the back of the buses. People who have mobility devices have to use the front of the bus, but those ambulatory seeking a kneeler or a ramp needed to. No one is allowed, no driver or trainman is allowed to question your disability by the T's own rules. You shouldn't be, no passenger should be denied service because of a disability. Basically, in the situation that we're in with the temporary systems that are in play, accessibility has not taken a back seat. And again, I would echo what Laura Relsford has said. If you are not permitted to board, questioned regarding your disability, or passed by a bus, please report the incident to 617-222-3200, tweet at MBTA. You can email. So the only way problems can be solved is if you take your responsibility to connect yourself with the T and let people know. If you don't let system-wide accessibility or actually the complaint department know that something's happened, then there won't be any corrections made. You have to let people know. And that's pretty much all I have to say today, except thank you for everyone else for participating.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Our next speaker and our final speaker is Carolyn Barrett, one of the co-chairs of RTAG. So I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn now.
Thanks, Sam. Just briefly from RTAG, we've continued to meet remotely throughout the pandemic, and we'll continue to do so until social distancing is something that isn't completely imperative. But we've been in regular contact with the T. We've been supporting, we've been looking for feedback online from riders who are accessing the T and in constant communication. I want to briefly call out the work we did with the ride to ensure that PCAs would be able to utilize the ride and avoid crowding on possible public transportation. This summer, as we move forward, we're looking for ways to ensure riders with disabilities are continuing to be prioritized in all of the T's decisions, and look forward to continuing to work with them.
Thank you, Carolyn. So with that, we're going to move into the Q&A portion of the meeting. So I'm just going to go over a few instructions for how to raise your hand and how the Q&A is going to be moderated. So to ask a question, you have to virtually raise your hand in Zoom. To do this on a computer, you can click the raise hand button in the bottom center of your screen. On a mobile device, tap the raise hand button in the bottom corner of your screen. And if you're calling in on the phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. Once you raise your hand, you'll be added to a queue with others who have raised their hands, and I'll call on folks first come, first serve to ask a question. When it's your turn to speak, I'll say your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number and let you know that I'm allowing you to speak in the meeting. If you're on a computer or a mobile device, a box will pop up in the center of your screen. You'll need to confirm that you'd like to be unmuted before you begin speaking. If you're on the phone, an automated recording will let you know that you are unmuted. You may speak as soon as the recording finishes. Once you are unmuted, everyone in the meeting can hear you. Before asking your question, please state your name and any organizational affiliation. After you ask your question, Judge King will repeat the question and direct it to the appropriate panelists. We ask that you only ask one question at a time so we can ensure everyone who has a question gets a chance to speak. If you have an additional question, please raise your hand again. As soon as you're finished asking your question, you'll be muted again. As a reminder, if for any reason you're unable to verbally ask a question, you may post it in the chat and we'll do our best to ensure it gets answered. So I'd like to ask Judge King to come back on video and on the screen now. Great. Excuse me a moment. Seems we may have lost Judge King's connection. So we'll begin the Q&A and I'll handle the moderation for now. So our first speaker who has a question is Jerry. So Jerry, I'm allowing you to talk now. Oh, Jerry, there is an issue with your version of Zoom. It says it's too old for me to allow you to talk. If you could please type your question into the chat, we'll read it and we'll ask it after I allow the next speaker. Okay, our next speaker then is going to be barlowmax@yahoo. It's an email address. You have permission to talk now.
Hi, this is Barbara Lomax, and I take the T. And for me, prior to March before the COVID-19 pandemic, had problems with a lot of times just the green line and having no one sort of state like where I am. I mean, I have problems with my eyesight, and so I depend on having the announcements of what stop I'm at, and it's oftentimes when that's an issue. That was, prior to the pandemic. I have since then taken the green line about a couple of weeks ago, and for the most part, it was fine. It wasn't a lot of people that were on the green line. However, I think people, when I think about maybe 8 or 9 people entered the cart, they were not clear about where to go. And we sort of took it upon ourselves to social distance. And I don't know, as it becomes more crowded, what that's going to be like. Hopefully the app that Logan mentioned is going to be helpful, but for a person who can't visually see all the time, that probably is going to be somewhat of a challenge to know, how many people are there, and if there's one cart that's more crowded than another, and so forth.
Thank you. So I'm going to direct the question to Laura Brailsford, and the question was relating to social distancing on the Green Line, especially for folks who have vision impairments that might need an alternative to understand which cars are crowded.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're actually lucky enough to be joined by Alicia Gomez tonight. Alicia, are you able to get your video on the screen? Let's see if she's available. There she is.
Yeah.
Alicia oversees our light rail operations and can give us a sense on how they're thinking about social distancing on Green Line.
So we're obviously practicing the social distancing guidelines, and having the motor persons, give that information to the customers, asking them to either move back or spread out a little bit. We've got officials monitoring those areas and making sure that our customers are working towards practicing that social distancing. And and that's pretty much, what we have right now. And we have plans. We're making up plans and looking to see different things to do.
Great, thank you. So our next question is coming from someone on the phone. The last 4 digits of the phone number are 7582, giving you permission to speak now.
Yes, my name is Don Summerfield, and I have to excuse myself because I didn't come from the beginning to know who the panelists are. It's pretty much the same question as last time. It's not an accessibility issue. Well, it is actually an accessibility issue, because being a person with a disability, I rely on clean hands a lot. And especially now, since this pandemic has started. Thank you for the soap that was put in Central and Davis, whoever it was, Jeff Bondville or staff or anyone from maintenance, but they didn't put in as suggested. It was then stolen, and if they refilled the dispensers that were there outside the wall. If you don't install a dispenser within the wall, it's likely going to get stolen again. And they have dispensers at T stations that have been built in the latter years inside the walls, i.e. at Arlington. These soap dispensers are outside the wall. They just flip open the top, take the soap out, then maintenance does not install more. If you break into the wall, put a dispenser there, the tube comes out, they're less likely to be able to break in. Who wants to take this wonderful question? Jeff, are you here?
Thanks, Don. So the question was about hand sanitizer and soap being installed in
No, it's not about hand sanitizer.
Sorry,
it's about soap.
Who wants to answer the question?
It's the same question I raised the last time.
All right, so first, Donald, it's great to hear your voice. It's been far too long, but we are also very lucky to be joined by Joe Cheever, who oversees our engineering and maintenance department, and we'll have some feedback for you. Joe?
Hi, Dawn. Make sure I'm off mute here. Yep. Okay. So hi, Dawn. I remember this question last time. I remember Jeff making sure that we got out there and replaced those dispensers. So it is very disheartening at Harvard. It seems like everywhere I turn, we have our new facility managers. Greg Fernandez, who is assigned to that Cambridge section of the Red Line, including Harvard, and he has expressed to me his frustration with the bathroom situation down there and the vandalism. We did take your recommendation to install it in the wall as obviously the right way to do it. We have been trying to standardize our dispenser system, especially during this COVID crisis. We've run into a lot of supply chain issues where, you know, certain types of bladders for soap dispensers and sanitization, you know, sanitizer dispensers have been really hard to come by, which really echoes our real need to be able to standardize the type of dispensers we have. So we have gone with those. They do seem a little, you know, less than ideal dispensers that really have to be installed on the outside on the wall. So I'm frustrated, Dawn, as I know you are. So let me take away again and have Greg look into this and see if we can improve the situation there at Harvard, and see if we can get those dispensers replaced again for the interim, and see if we can get the carpenters to figure out a way to get those installed so they don't keep coming off the wall.
Thank you so much. So our next question is from James. I'm going to allow you to talk now.
Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
You hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi Laura, how you doing? James Don Jr. I didn't quite hear on the sanitizer. Maybe it was kind of very low on my speaker computer. But I came from Somerville on the 87. 88 this morning to Somerville from Leechmere. And the disinfectant was kind of strong. And I know I have allergies that can trigger by the fragrances and so forth. So has there any been complaints on sanitation on any of the buses and so forth?
I apologize sincerely. I was trying to help the judge get back into the meeting, and I.
Oh. Okay. All right. Okay.
Could you just repeat the question?
Okay, I'll make it simple. It's like there's some sanitizers that is not as strong as others. So I'm just wondering, have anyone been complaining about after the bus been sanitized or disinfected, they had breathing troubles, things like that? Because I had a little trouble this morning. Around this afternoon from Leechmere. I made a complaint, can't take the bus now, but I'm just wondering, has that been sort of an issue?
So the question is, has there been discussion about what's being used to sanitize the buses because the smell can be strong and uncomfortable to others? So, Laura?
Yes.
Right. I can answer that, James. Today,
hey, Laura.
We have not received any complaints or feedback about that being problematic.
Laura, say that again, please.
Sean, did you? So Sean Mills is one of our senior managers.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't had any. Yeah, go ahead. So we haven't had any complaints about the smell or anything else yet, but we sanitize the buses every night. We haven't had any complaints or anything else, but if you have something that you're concerned about, definitely send it in to us so we know.
If I could add to that, and I feel under duress, Sean, I like the, you're looking good. I wanted to, I just wanted to note that everything that we use on the system to clean goes through a review by our safety department to ensure that we're within kind of the various protocols and regulations of, you know, what is acceptable for use. So, you know, we're confident that the items we're using are fully compliant with all kinds of all the state and federal regulations. If you have a specific complaint, though, I do encourage you to call it in. So that's something we can look at.
Thank you, General Manager. Our next comment is from someone on the phone. Your last 4 digits of your phone number are 1699. You're being allowed to talk now.
This is Gerard Plant, a member of the Boston Center for Independent Living. And I'm wondering if Catherine Quigley is there?
She is not here as a panelist.
Okay, I just have a comment to make that she and I and gentleman, I forget his name now, but he was with us last August on a walkthrough at Riverside Station. And we did the whole parking lot. There was a problematic entry area, the main entry area actually going to the sidewalk that leads to the ramp and then up to the platform Riverside Station over here in Auburndale where I live. And they did a comprehensive walkthrough with me and noticed that virtually all of the handicap parking signs or accessible parking signs can't be seen because they're old and outmoded. They did make a list and said that they would begin taking issue with that. There are funds for it in the budget. And Eric is his name, his first name. He was with us, I forget his last name right now. But he assured me that because last year at this time I was co-chair of the Newton Commission on Disability. I'm still a member of the committee, but the commission, Commission on Disability for Newton, but I'm not co-chair. I'm still a member there, but I'm speaking on behalf of all people with disabilities who access Riverside Station, access and egress. So some work was done that they promised to be done, but the signs are still there. I went about 3 weeks ago just to check on Riverside. I haven't taken Riverside since January because of the pandemic, and just talking to a few of the people who work there. And so I noticed that they weren't, the HP signs were still not replaced. I know that the pandemic has been an issue on a lot of projects, but I'm just wondering if they still have that on their list of to-do.
Thank you. So the question was about the signs at Riverside Station being unable to see. Joe?
Yeah, they're HP signs, and they can't be seen. There's nothing on them. They're so old that they wore off because sun, that faces the south. So the sun has done a lot of damage to them in the winter, of course, and just age.
Yeah, I can take this. I can take this one, Sam. I think, yeah, they did a nice job meeting you out there. Eric Legaloff is his name. He's the deputy director in facilities. He's actually moved over. Is working for Katie now in capital delivery. But I do remember this. I remember the you know, for lack of a better term, the punch list of things and doing the vegetation work to make sure that we got the sight lines much improved. I wasn't tracking the HP signs that were needing to be replaced. I'm sure it's on the list. So what I'll do is I'll take that back, and if it was on the list and that's what we need to do, we replace those signs, you know, as a routine basis. We got a lot of them out there. I guess I can't be too surprised that we have a few out there that aren't readable, but appreciate you bringing it to our attention. We'll make sure that if it wasn't on the list, it is now, and we'll make sure to get the signs replaced. This is at the Riverside. I assume it's the paid parking lot there in front of the station, right?
So we mute people immediately after the question.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I'm going to assume that. I assume there are parking lot. It is our parking lot at our station, our spot. So if that's the case, we'll definitely get those signs looked at and get them replaced.
Awesome. Thank you. So our next question is from Abby. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, thank you. Just to pick up on the question that was just asked as a an afterthought. I think faded HP signs are fairly ubiquitous, so if there's a way to systematically canvass for them, that would be great, rather than relying on individual complaints. And then my real question is outreach to encourage spatial distancing on vehicles probably should instruct able-bodied riders to yield wheelchair spaces and elderly and disabled seats to those they're intended for, because under ordinary circumstances, those spaces are at a premium for those with strollers and other encumbrances, and maybe more so as people try to distance. So my question is, will drivers or outreach materials remind the able-bodied to yield those spaces to those who need them? And then sort of a corollary to that is that disabled riders are typically less able to wait for the next bus or train without consequences if they ascertain that the one that they had been waiting for is too full. Is there a way of getting them boarding priority when a vehicle is approaching in a crowded condition?
Awesome, thank you. So there were two questions there. So one was about will there be guidance and messaging to, especially during social distancing, to encourage able-bodied passengers to give the wheelchair accessible spaces to those who need them on board buses? And then also, when there is a bus coming that is too crowded, how long will someone be asked to wait, or how will that work in terms of the next bus coming? Laura?
So I will answer that first question. Abby, I think that's a really great suggestion. We are working with bus operations right now, and sort of what the plans will be, especially once that front door reopens. It's actually the case that currently on the buses, because most passengers are boarding from the rear door, there is a barrier just beyond the accessible seating, so that your average rider isn't even really able to get up to the accessible seating today. That will obviously come down once we start using the front door for everyone again. So I think thinking about signage and messaging, just raising awareness about keeping that area clear is a great idea. So we will definitely include that in our ongoing conversations. The second question was specifically about if a bus is too full to safely pick up passengers and there's somebody with a disability waiting at the bus stop, what is the protocol? Those are conversations we're also having right now as we speak. We've had a very long-standing rule at the T for our bus operators that if the bus is too full for completely reasons unrelated to the pandemic, that if there is somebody with an apparent disability at the stop, the bus driver can't just drive by. They have to pull over and let the customer know when the next bus is arriving and why they're not able to board them. So we're trying to make sure we're incorporating the spirit of that into any new policies that get developed as well.
Thanks, Laura. So our next question is from Meg. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, this is Meg Robertson. I work at the Commission for the Blind as an orientation and mobility specialist. And one of the questions I'm hearing from our consumers is not understanding how the subway is going to work once people are allowed to go back to work or are going to be using it more. The concern is that placement on the platform, where there be what kind of announcements, and will the announcements give enough verbal information for the person to know how to locate themselves on the platform.
Thank you. So the question was about when people start taking the subway again, what kind of announcements will there be, and will there be enough verbal instruction to know your location on the platform? Laura?
So like the general manager mentioned, the information that's going to be shared with customers about social distancing is not going to be prescriptive. It's just going to provide sort of general guidance and reminders about the importance of keeping as much distance as possible for others. All of the key messaging that will be going up with signs will also have an audio component using the PA systems on all of our platforms. So that same information will be broadcast audibly as well as visually. Also, a lot of this content, I think all of this content will also be available on our website if people want to spend some time sort of familiarizing themselves with some of these new considerations as they unfold. The website will be a great option.
Thank you, Laura. Our next question is from Mick. I'm unmuting you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I had several questions. Mixapater, named plaintiff, GBLS. And I had several questions, and they're all related to the same thing. We wanted to know what's the update on the Ruggles Street elevator. But more importantly, I'm going to go to the other most important question, which was, how is the update or upgrades, or what's happening with the trolley between Mattapan Station and Ashmont Station? There was a lot of questions about that during our meeting last night concerning what they call the dangerousness and the inability for people with disability to access without feeling that they're going to fall or something from that trolley line.
Thank you, Mick. So the first question was looking for an update on the Ruggles elevator, and the second was with safety and accessibility considerations on the Mattapan trolley. Laura?
Yes.
Hi, Mick. It's good to hear your voice too. Katie, I'm going to ask if you can join us on screen. Katie Cho, again, oversees our capital delivery department and may have an update for you on both issues.
Well, I can speak to Ruggles. I cannot speak to the Mattapan issue. Ruggles construction is ongoing. As you know, the elevators are shut down. The project is on schedule, although has been impacted by COVID. But we're not anticipating at this point for construction to last longer than what we had originally put in place. So, so phase one, which is the elevators, is ongoing and on schedule, and phase two is in design.
And Mick, with respect to your question about Mattapan, that's something we can get you an answer about after the nope, actually. We think we have one right now.
I can give you a very general answer. We continue to invest in the Mattapan line to keep it obviously running with an acceptable number of trolleys. We fully acknowledge that those trolleys are very old and are not close to being compliant with current standards. We went through a really extensive process about a year ago with the community to get ourselves on a trajectory to replacing the current trolleys. This is going to take a number of years. What the long-term plan is, however, is right now we're in the process of doing the Green Line extension where we are putting Type 10 cars on the Green Line. Eventually we will replace all the cars on the Green Line, and the Type 10 trolleys, which I think there's roughly 10 or 11 in service now. The Type 10s will come over to the Mattapan line. That's going to require a significant investment in the line. It is realistically down the road, probably 8 to 10 years, but there will be service on that line with modern vehicles eventually. But there's a significant number of interim steps between that.
Thank you, General Manager. So our next question is coming from Gina. Gina, I'm going to unmute you now.
Yes, hi. Hi, this is Gina. I'm totally blind and I have mobility issues and I rely on the paratransit. And primarily I've been using the Uber pilot program. And for some reason it's not working this month for me. I got an email and I followed the instructions, but it's still not working. I've sent an email to the MBTA and I have not heard anything back. And I do have medical appointments that I need to go to in person. I have to get lab work and things like that. And I'm concerned that if I have to take the regular ride, they tend to get me there like 2 hours early and make me wait at least an hour on the way back. And I really don't want to hang around a lot, you know, during this pandemic. A lot of the places want you to go in and they want you to leave right away, and I wouldn't have anywhere to go. So I'm just getting concerned. I'm wondering if you could let me know if there's something in the works to resolve this, or who I may contact.
Gina, this is Laura from System-Wide Accessibility.
Yes,
So
hi, Laura.
Generally, with these type of issues, the most effective way to resolve the problem is to reach out to either Uber or Lyft directly. If you've already tried that and that has not worked, and you said you've already reached out to the ride and it hasn't worked, I would ask you to go ahead and email my team at swa@mbta.com. Just share with us your we'll have your email address. Share with us your full name and your ride ID number, and we'll get it over to our colleagues in the ride and make sure this gets straightened out.
Thanks, Laura. Our next general manager, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can I permission to revise and extend my previous remark? I realized I made an error. The cars that are now being introduced on the Green Line are Type 9 cars. There will be new cars purchased for the Green Line, which are Type 10. The Type 9s will eventually go over to Mattapan. Sorry, I got the numbers wrong the last time. My apologies for the confusion.
Thanks for clarifying. So our next question is coming from someone on the phone. The last 4 digits of the phone number are 6400, and I'm unmuting you now.
Hi, this is Tom from Somerville. I have 2 questions. The first one is the cleanliness, the concern of cleanliness of elevators. Real quickly to speak, I was at the I was at Kenmore Station and I was using the elevator on the Hotel Commonwealth side. And unfortunately, that elevator smelled like urine. It was at Sunday at 3:45 p.m. And when I came back around 9:30 that night, it still smelled of urine. And I complained to the MBTA staff, and then I put it in as a formal complaint with the 322-3200 number. The second question is when are they going to switch the speakers over to the bus information at Harvard Square Station in the upper busway from the red line to bus information? Because when you're waiting for the 77, you're really not hearing the bus information. You're just hearing the red line information. Thank you.
To clarify, Tom, were you asking about verbal announcements at Harvard Square in the busway? You can only hear announcements about the red line?
It's because when you're waiting for. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. All right, Tom, it's clarifying the question. So I'm going to turn that question about the Harvard Square busway over to Logan from Customer Technology to answer.
Hi, Tom. When you bring up that announcement issue at the Harvard Square busway, I know exactly what you're talking about. I thought we had that issue resolved. So I'm going to make a note of that, and we're going to make sure that we get that adjusted so that the announcements are consistent with what's being shown on the countdown sign, that you're getting bus announcements and not red line announcements. So thanks for bringing that up to us.
Thanks, Logan. And then Tom's other question was regarding the cleanliness in elevators, specifically the elevator in Kenmore. Laura, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, but I'm also gonna ask Joe Chiva to get back on the screen to help me out here. So Tom, as you know, I think from our last plaintiffs meeting, settlement related meeting, last year we had convened an internal interdepartmental committee on elevator cleanliness. We've got a bunch of initiatives that are still happening, one of which was a new cleaning contract was entered into this spring. But I'll let Joe tell you a little bit more about that.
Yep, thanks, Laura. So I got this one. This is Sunday at the Kenmore Commonwealth side. So what we have as a new, with our new cleaning contract, Kenmore comes under the core of the system, which is our vendor TMM, and we can now, with the new technology, we're going to be able to track you know, how that complaint came in and whether it was resolved or not. So that'll be a good test case for us. So we can have the team look into it and see what happened. I can tell you that we get, as I've said before in these meetings and prior presentations, we get very frustrated with the urine smell in elevators. It's a smell that's like very difficult to get out. So even when we clean it, it gets soaked into some of the substructure of the elevator itself and becomes very hard to clean to get it completely out. Some of the new elevator floors that we're installing during some of these diversions, Kone is putting new elevator floors that are basically a rhino shield floor, do protect the substructure from getting saturated with the urine. So we're going to be able to, when we do clean it, it does actually satisfy it gets out the full, obviously the sanitation issue, but also the smell. So that's all a side note from the bigger picture. Like Laura said, previous presentations, we've talked about the new cleaning contract. It's fully in place as of March 1st. And we have seen some improvement with each of the vendors, but we do have our third-party auditor here checking to make sure that they are showing continuous improvement. And what we have identified is that elevators, as you all know, is something that has been an issue in the past, and we have identified it as one of our critical items to make sure that our third-party auditor and our facility managers and coordinators are tracking the cleanliness of the elevators routinely. I think there was questions about the task and frequency associated with cleaning elevators. In other words, how many times a day do we clean the elevators? We're getting away from making sure that the elevators are cleaned a certain number of times a day. What we want to have is when our auditors come through, when our monitors come through, we see or have achieved a clean elevator. And that's where we really want to see the improvement of seeing more positive results of our monitoring to show that we're getting more elevators, our elevators are cleaned more often. So that's what we shifted to. We're very excited to have these two vendors fully embrace our commitment to cleaner stations and cleaner for our customers. When it comes to COVID-19, we were throwing a curveball there right as the new contract was put into place. However, what we did was supplement the existing contract with some additional disinfecting of high touch points and high traffic areas. So it's a twofold initiative, both in the high traffic areas where we see a lot of customers, higher counts, a lot more folks coming through. We want to make sure that those get disinfected more often. And then second to that is just the frequency of disinfection. So even though we clean the elevators routinely, for example, we are going in some locations twice a day, but in the subway areas, every 4 hours, coming through and hitting those high touch point areas. And when I say high touch point areas, I mean what you need to actually touch in order to get that elevator to work. So whether it's feeling the the buttons, or being able to touch a handrail, or anything that you would need to touch on the fare vending machines. Those are areas where we're making sure that those get disinfected routinely. And when I say routinely, every 4 hours. So they both clean. It's a two-part process. We clean it first and then disinfect. And then, in fact, we have our third-party auditor, like I mentioned, also has boosted to have ATP testing, so that we're actually testing some locations to make sure that the cleaning is actually being effective. So these are all initiatives that we put into place middle of March as this COVID-19 started to become real to us here in Boston. And that came right in concert with our existing base contract. And that is continued. We have contracts in place through the summer, and we're looking at putting this in place now for basically our routine maintenance program. That every flu season we need to be increasing our disinfectant in the facilities and stations, facilities for our own employees, which I'm certainly concerned about. I know the GM's concerned about, but I think for this group, the stations and those high touch points areas and those high frequency or high traffic areas, we're really focusing on making sure that we're doing as much disinfectant as necessary to make sure that everybody's safe coming through our stations. I hope that's enough of a summary. I know I went off there a little bit, but Laura wanted to make sure that I touch on that today, and that question sparked it right for us. So appreciate the question.
Thanks so much, Joe. It's a very in-depth answer. So our next question is coming from someone, your name is an email address, Barlomax. I'm going to unmute you now so that you may ask your question. I apologize, give me 1 second. Okay, I've unmuted you now.
Okay. I also want to just thank you for putting this together. This is great. Another question I have is in terms of locating the phone, or if you needed to contact someone. Are the phones in each station located in a similar place, or is it so if I needed assistance, I could find it like next to a particular place, or will it, I'd have to kind of look around to find them?
Thank you. So the question was to locating the phone or the call box in stations and if they would be in a similar place. It looks like we've lost Laura briefly, so I'm going to toss this to Rob Sampson from SWA.
Sure. Yeah, so our call boxes are located in a variety of different locations at stations. Consistently, you'll find them at each level that's serviced by an elevator. You'll also find them at a minimum, at least one in the lobby areas, as well as platforms. Some stations also have what we call customer assistance areas, and those are delineated by white directional tactile that runs perpendicular from the yellow detectable warnings to the wall. It's also indicated by signage as well. Those areas, for the most part, will have call boxes. We're still deploying those areas, so it can be inconsistent, but I would say, definitely at elevators, you should at least find one there.
Thanks, Rob. So our next question is from Bill Henning. I'm going to give you permission to speak now. Go ahead, Bill, you've been unmuted. Bill, we can't hear you if you're trying to speak. I'm going to mute you again, and you can raise your hand to get back into the back of the queue once we've sorted out the technical difficulties. So then our next question is going to come from Jerry. Jerry, I'm unmuting you now.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Jerry.
Great. This question piggybacks on the earlier question in regards to people with disabilities needing to board a bus, and once the capacity has been reached, particularly in the new capacity of like 20 people or whatnot, will people with disabilities be included in that count? Like, say, for example, I'm a wheelchair user and I'm on the bus. Will that be counted towards the 20? Or say there were 20 non-disabled folks on the bus, could you still accommodate, or will you still be able to accommodate a wheelchair user, or how will that work?
Good question, Jerry. So the question was about when we're looking at limiting to about 20 people on the bus, how does that impact wheelchair users and how would they be counted in that figure? Laura?
Correct.
So I think the first thing that I want to say is that, we and the general manager may want to speak more on this. Currently, there aren't any clear plans to set a hard limit for how many people can be on a vehicle at any particular time. But Jerry, yes, in terms of just general tracking and awareness about what's crowded, what's not, certainly everybody, including wheel mobility users, get counted in that total.
Thanks, Laura. So then our next question is going to come from Mick. Mick, I'm unmuting you now.
Hi, I was just reminded that I didn't get an answer to the second half of my question. And the way I was reminded was that the roller coaster ride into Ashmont Station was not addressed.
I'm sorry, what particular thing about Ashmont Station?
Well, when you're coming in on the trolley from Mattapan into Ashmont Station, there is a curve that has been compared to the roller coaster curve when you're coming into the station. And that was the part of the question that I did not address, and they wanted to know, is there any plans to how to fix that or change the entrance from that side, or what is the intention of the T, since that is a real hazardous turn?
Thank you, Mick. Yeah, I know exactly the turn you're talking about. So I'm going to toss that to Laura to discuss the curve coming into Ashmont Station on the Mattapan trolley and if anything's going to be done with that.
So actually, I'm going to ask if Alicia Gomez is still with us. Alicia, are you still here? See if she's aware of any pending plans.
Yeah, I'm still here. Actually, I'm not aware of any pending plans. I mean, in that area, I don't know if they're talking about the Cedar Grove area. We have tried to mitigate any sort of speeding over in that area to kind of stop that roller coaster feeling. But I can make a note of this and bring it back and see what we have or what we can do in that Ashmont area.
Thanks, Alicia. Our next question is from Kevin. Kevin, I'm unmuting you now.
What about, are they doing anything to have better stop announcements on the buses, or have them, I mean, sometimes they're not audible or they don't do them at all?
Thank you. So the question is about stop announcements on the bus and how they're inconsistent and sometimes not audible. Laura, once again, do you have an answer for that one?
Sure, that's a good question, Kevin. So if this is one area where we spend a lot of time and focus tracking how we're doing by using our internal monitoring program. And this is one aspect that, pretty consistently shows that the equipment is working very reliably. Both the audio and visual announcements are working on average more than 98% of the time. That certainly does not mean it's working all of the time. In these situations, if the equipment's not working, the operators are expected to make what we call announcements at key stops, so sort of the major intersections and transfer points. If you find that's not happening, again, that's something we want to know about so we can investigate and follow up. Also, just one thing that anyone should be encouraged to do, if you happen to be on a bus and the automated equipment's not working, and you're going to need some help, recognizing when a stop is coming up, please just let the driver know that you're going to need your stop announced. Now, they should be making key big stop announcements anyway, but that is a great example of a reasonable request for assistance.
Laura. So our next question is from Bill Henning. Bill, I'm going to unmute you now.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you this time.
I did hit it on mute the last time. I don't know what happened. Thank you. I'd just like to begin by making a comment that I really appreciated what Steve Postak and Laura Brailsford said about the murder of George Floyd, the sentiment shared by BCIL. And I'd really, really like to commend Joanne Daniels-Feingold for her obviously deeply felt sentiments around this senseless murder, which is a pattern of murder that we cannot tolerate as a society. And I'm pleased to hear that where the T stands on this in the disability community. Couple points regarding safety and access during the pandemic. I think it's going to be very important that we continue these discussions. The challenge of getting people on buses with the front door, the issues of masks. I think there will be issues, especially as we go through phase 2, 3, and 4 of reopening communities. And I think it's going to take a commitment to discussion. Obviously, this meeting this evening reflects that, but I just want to emphasize that. And I do have one question, which would be, we see the city of Boston and other communities working to build bus lanes to make travel quicker, which will also help in the social distancing. If buses can move faster, there won't be stacked buses, as much crowding as things go along. Will there also be an effort around building more bus shelters out in the communities? The so-called amenities, though, they're really necessities, because for so often, especially in the poorer neighborhoods of Boston, bus has been the primary transportation means. It's lacked shelters, it's lacked benches, and all such things. I wonder if that can be coupled with some of these initiatives around expediting bus service. And of course, we would assume they'd be accessible, but they really are matters of access for people with disabilities who may not be able to wait out in the cold so much, need to sit down while waiting for a bus, things like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. So the question was about amenities such as bus shelters and benches, if those can be coupled in with the initiatives to build more bus lanes. Laura?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And again, the general manager may want to jump in here, but in our last capital planning cycle, there was some funding identified for essentially a new shelter, third-party shelter contract that has the potential, it's still early, but has the potential to expand the number of shelters we have system-wide. In addition, we secured some accessibility-focused funding that we're hoping to use to target some additional benches and potentially shelters at locations where we know the need is the greatest. So we don't have clear timelines yet, but I'm imagining over the next couple of months, those are going to be developed.
Thanks, Laura. So we are approaching 7:30 when this meeting is set to wrap up. We have 3 more folks with their hands raised, so we're going to take those last 3 questions, and then we're going to wrap up the meeting. So our next question is someone on the phone. The last 4 digits of the phone number are 6400, and I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, this is Tom from Somerville again. I think this is a question maybe directed to I think directed to Logan Nash and also to Catherine Quigley, who I don't believe is at the meeting right now. I think there's still an issue that still goes on about stop announcements coming up too late on certain bus stops, and I think we realized that I think it's going to have to take some better bus stop spacing and like elimination, well, not elimination, but consolidation of various different bus stops that are non-ADA. Like meaning like you wouldn't like take away a hospital, you wouldn't take away a bus transfer, you wouldn't take away a senior complex, but to take away stops but to take away that stop that may be very close to that senior complex, it's not allowing the stop announcement for that senior complex to come up accurately, so you have time to hit the button for the driver to slow down to stop at the ADA stop. Yeah, thanks. That's the question. Is there any future plans of rectifying that?
So I think the question was about announcements at bus stops and maybe consolidating bus stops, but of course being cautious of which bus stops. Did I understand correctly?
Yeah, right. Like as far as like bus stops that are hospitals, senior complexes, bus transfers, wellness centers, things like that. You of course prioritize, but let's say you have another stop that's not in front of a stop like that. Let's say that stop that's not so important that becomes before the ADA stop is too close to the one that's the ADA stop. Like for instance, on the 89 route, they eliminated Temple Street, but now it calls up a lot sooner for Marshall Street, which is right in front of the Wellness Center, which is an ADA stop, and they solved that problem there because now when you hit Marshall Street, you hit the button, the driver has plenty of time to slow down to get to the stop, where it wasn't that case on that Temple Street there when it was too close to Marshall Street.
Sure. So Tom, your question, I believe, is one we've talked about before, you've raised before, right? It's that sometimes if the stops are really close together, by the time a customer hits the call button, the bus is already going by that stop. It doesn't give the operator enough time to slow down and stop. So I'm going to actually ask Logan, who's already on screen, to and then Sean as well to follow up.
And I can't speak to the stop consolidation as much, but I will say, and Tom, you've been someone who's been really great about this. The tickets you've submitted when you have noticed that a stop announcement is not timed correctly, that's really, really valuable for us because, we do have frustrations with our stop announcement system that we can't make a tweak and try it out the next day. It's sort of a slow process. It takes effect with our schedule changes. But I will say, and I want to thank you for sending feedback about those poorly timed stop announcements. And the more specific feedback like that we can get, we can take action on them. But you're correct that the closely spaced stops, that is a challenge, but there may be things we can do on the technology side.
Yeah, and on our end for bus operations, we've been trying to consolidate bus stops and everything else with how close they are and how far they are and everything else. So we have been trying to make it a better opportunity for everyone to come out and get to a bus stop and not have to worry about being bypassed or anything else. So we're trying to eliminate bus stops that are within a certain amount of feet, everything else. But that's what we're trying to do right now. But if you have any other concerns or anything for a certain bus route, we definitely want to hear about it.
Thanks, Sean. So our next question is from Jerry. Jerry, I'm going to unmute you now.
Sure, thanks. I guess I just wanted to clarify my earlier question in regards to bus capacity in the when I believe the general manager in his initial remarks said that they would be going to, considering a bus that has 20 people to be crowded. So that was what my question was around. you know, and I believe Laura said that they hadn't talked about, you know, what capacity would be yet. So I just wanted to make sure that I understood, going forward, what will the T consider to be, capacity for buses?
Great. Laura, would you like to clarify about what capacity will be for the buses?
Sure. So, well, now I'm going to defer to the general manager.
If I understood the question correctly, and it tailed off at the end on the audio, I think the questioner was just concerned, what does crowded mean? If we've decided that there is a crowding threshold of 20, what it means is that is the threshold that we will measure, and as best we can communicate that a bus is crowded. We don't plan on having a sort of prescriptive cap on the buses, that if you are the 21st person to get on a bus, that somehow you will be removed or denied service. That is not the intent. Our intent is to have this as a threshold, and obviously do as much as we can to provide adequate service to avoid crowding situations where we can. So I hope that's helpful. It is a threshold for us to measure and to understand and hopefully address where crowding is occurring. It is not a capacity limit at which folks will be denied service. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, General Manager. So our next question is from Susan. Susan, I'm unmuting you now.
Hi, I just was trying to figure out the pilot program. My information was that it was canceled.
Okay, we don't have anyone directly from the ride on the panel tonight, but I can toss that to Laura to see if she has any guidance.
Susan, your best bet definitely is to go to our homepage, mbta.com, and then go over to the ride specific page, I believe. If you are able to access the chat box too, we can put that link in there again for you. But there's information on the current status of the pilot in there.
Thanks, Laura. So then our final question is Joanne has raised her hand to ask a question. So I'm gonna give Joanne permission to unmute herself now.
Hi. I hadn't really thought about a specific bus stop, but considering where it is, I think it would be needed to come back. Right before Brigham and Women's Hospital started doing work at their 15 Francis Street entrance, the T had put in one of the bump-in style bus stops. After the work was completed, that bus stop was never reinstated. I've had a couple of times when, my own hard head had me going to the hospital from Braintree on public transportation, and it would have been really helpful to have that particular bus stop available. Is there any chance that that bus stop that was actually was put there and then taken away because of construction would be able to be reinstated? That would be at the corner of Francis Street and Huntington Avenue.
Thanks, Joanne. So the question was that particular bus stop near Brigham and Women's that was put in temporarily during construction. Is there a chance that it could be reinstated as a permanent bus stop? Sean?
Oh no, it was a permanent bus stop, but the hospital had done some work, and the bus stop was not being used because that whole corner was unable to be used. And now it's available again. The work is complete. The bus stop was not a temporary bus stop.
So Sean may have more information, but Joanne, I would just say I don't know about that particular stop off the top of my head, but we would definitely look into that. Unless
Yeah,
Sean
but he had put the work in to put the bump in and everything, and it just been completed shortly before they started doing work at 15 Francis.
So Joanne, definitely email us with the exact location, because I'm not too familiar with the exact stop that you're talking about either. But if we can make a bus stop there, we'll put it back there. That's fine. Definitely email us.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. So that is the end of our questions, and we have gone a couple minutes over time, but I want to thank all of our panelists and our teachers for being here with us today. I'd also like to thank all of you for attending and joining, and of course, Judge King for his update and hosting this meeting. And I'm looking forward to our next settlement update in 6 months in December. And I just want to throw one more reminder in there about the next RTAG meeting coming up on July 16th at 4 p.m. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great evening.